that will work. Okay, thanks. That will work. Okay, so this is a normal conversation. Anna, first of all, thanks a lot for your time. Thanks a lot for being with us, learning more about supply chain. I think that something that is always important in supply chain is to start learning about the people behind the supply chain. And in supply chain and everything related with supply chain, we can see that it's a man's work, pretty much. In supply chains, there in the past, there are just few women that work in supply chain or have experience. And you as a woman with a huge background in supply chain and tons of experience in this field, can you tell us how is for a woman to be in the supply chain? How is for you to be in this field?
Well, it's an honor to be in this field. At my age, I've been doing supply chain for well over 30 years. So when I started, there were very few women in the field. But nowadays, the next generation, there are many, many, many more women. Many women are studying engineering. They are studying supply chain. So this is changing. They're now starting to enter leadership roles. When I did it, I was probably one of 10% of women. I would sit in a negotiation. There would be 20 people in the room. I would be the only female. But there's a time for everything. I was very lucky because I had many sponsors who were men that took an interest in my career. They took an interest to help me and to sponsor me and to give me mentorship. So, I was able to grow to very senior level roles. So, I started as a very junior planner, and worked my way up to chief supply chain officer. So, it's been, a lot of hard work and progress, but, it certainly was difficult, not having many more female role models. I did have a few, but, now, like I said, the next generation, we pay it forward, and now it's changing.
Okay, thanks, Anna. So I must say that you are one of those pioneers in this career. So you pretty much build the road for the new generation. And I have seen in your background that you have experience in things related with procurement, is some of your expertise. How you seen the procurement change in the supply chain the last couple of years? How the procurement is evolving right now in supply chain?
Well, it's been evolving for the last 20 years or so, Santiago. It started out as purchasing, very transactional. You issue a purchase order, you need to buy a pen, you purchase a pen. There was never really thought about it. When I really entered procurement, this was in my consumer packaged goods days. I was working for Unilever, big global consumer packaged goods company. And Unilever at the time was looking to create opportunities for supply management. So we went from purchasing to supply management to procurement. That's been the evolution. And really, the idea was to understand the cost drivers, right? So people with a planning background, people with a finance background started to get into the procurement function, because it was about understanding what this part was worth. It was no longer about how much will I pay from supplier A versus supplier B versus supplier C. You get 3 quotes and you give the one with the best price, the purchase order. It became about understanding all of the input costs and learning to take out cost from the value stream, right? So it was about understanding the materials and the conversion costs and the logistics costs. So it was about total cost of ownership and how do you break up the different components of cost. So materials, conversion, freight and logistics. And then procurement took on much more significant strategic roles because it became about creating supplier partnerships. It was about creating long-term contracts with strategic partners and learning to create win-win solutions, right? So it meant co-innovation, co-creation. It was about investing together, in order to grow the business. Now I've been doing this since the start of the last decade, right? When this whole concept of partnering became, in my world, it became part of what procurement was about. Since the pandemic, this has been the difference maker, right? This has been the difference maker for many manufacturers that were much smaller. The bigger companies, the Procter and Gamble's, the Walmarts, the McDonald's, the Amazons, have been working this way for a long time. Apple has been working this way for a very long time. But now it became, you have a major supply disruption, and it lasted a very long time. So it wasn't like a natural event, like a hurricane or a fire. It became much more about a sustained, prolonged supply chain disruption. And really, the way we work now, the way manufacturers work with suppliers and the entire ecosystem of the supply chain, from customer all the way through to supplier and supplier's supplier, has changed. And procurement is at the heart of it, because it is about the ability to respond and the ability to recover quickly from the disruption. And the only way you can do that is to be fully integrated into a collaborative relationship with the supply base. You have to be a partner of choice. You have to be a customer of choice, because the suppliers are going to be the enabler of your success and your ability to recover, right? And now suppliers hold the power. Okay, now you want to manage for long term. You want to do the right thing for the long term, because this will end someday, these supply chain disruptions. And then, we go on after that, and you want to have these collaborative relationships that are going to be able to deliver. And it's based on mutual benefit, mutual growth, and then taking out the cost, taking out the waste, taking out the inefficiencies together by being part of the same team.
Okay, something that you just mentioned that is difficult, I think, to accomplish in most of supply chain is collaboration and mutual benefit between different partners. You mentioned the customer of choice, the partner of choice, and this collaboration is in some cases, I'm saying in some companies or in some cultures, difficult to accomplish due to the way that we as humans manage things. We most of the time don't trust each other, and for that reason, collaboration is difficult to accomplish. So, with your experience and your background in different areas, in different companies over the last years, how we can manage to create collaboration between companies, how we can manage this, how we can build a collaboration system in companies.
It's not an easy process. It takes time and it takes investment in the relationship, right? But it also requires very senior sponsorship. You need to have the senior leadership from both companies driving this change, right? You need to have both the customer and the supplier senior leaders talking together. And these are the decision makers. They need to make it happen together, but it takes time and it takes a lot of preparation. It takes absolute trust, right? It's going to take trust over time. And not everybody not everybody is going to be your strategic partner, right? So if you have 1,000 suppliers, you're lucky if you have 1%, 1 to 10% of your supply base will be these suppliers. But, essentially it has to be mutual. You have to have the right legal framework. You have to have a clear understanding if there is intellectual property and there is development that requires, intellectual property and patents, that has to be legally framed out in terms of who owns what and who gets what. You can create exclusive relationships about certain markets. So there's a lot of preparation that has to go into it. And there has to be mutual benefit, otherwise it can't work. If it's going to be one-sided or heavily sided in one favor versus another, it won't work. So it does take time to invest, several years, I would say. But then once you identify those partners that you can get into long-term collaborative relationships with, then you sign a long-term agreement. You have to sign multiple year contracts, because if I'm the supplier and I'm going to invest and you only give me 12-month contract, that's not a benefit for me. I need to know that I will have protection for several years, right? So I agree with you 100%. They're not easy, but nothing that's worth this kind of investment will work unless you invest the time and the planning up front. So this is not an overnight solution, but it starts with the day-to-day relationships at the local level, and then you move into more strategic conversations until the top business owners are involved, right? This is not a middle, procurement manager, sales manager kind of conversation. This is top to top meetings between the CEO and the CEO or the COO, whatever, the senior leaders have to have this conversation together.
Okay, so it's something that we build through time. We need to invest time, we need to invest efforts to get until this point. But in your experience, can you share with us something that you already have accomplished in this field,
Yeah.
like saying between two companies, or it could be something that you have a good experience, or something that where you had a bad experience. So we always learn from good and bad. Can you share with us some story about these things related with procurement?
Yeah, absolutely. So it started out when I first entered into the procurement business. I was a senior manager and I was put in charge of rigid packaging componentry, right? So bottles and caps and, injection molded items. So basically plastics packaging. So I made it my business to learn every cost driver of the process. So that meant visiting my suppliers and visiting the factories and standing on the line and learning the production of the materials that I was buying. And for me, I don't negotiate based on, holding a straight face or, I'm not going to share information. The way I have achieved my success is through the power of data, right? So I leverage data and I make it my business to know the cost drivers. And what I mean by that is, what's the cost of resin? What's the cost of labor? What's the cost of energy? I understand every component, and I expected my suppliers to share that information with me, right? And you have to be very firm, so if you want to do business with me, you need to provide this open book components of the cost. And so then you do the analysis and you compare and you compare versus the industry that's out there. You have to really do your homework. And when you understand, you basically have the conversation with the supplier to say, okay, I think these are all the components. This is your margin. I want you to have success, which means you need to make money. I've actually had suppliers make a bid, and I said to them, you can't have my business because I don't think you're charging me enough. So this is where the trust comes in, right? I said to the supplier, no, I'm not giving you my business because your price is too low. It's not sustainable, which means, you are not making enough money, which means in the future, you could be closing your business. You're not making enough money. So they said to me, no, we can assure you we're making enough gross margin because we are very efficient. And they opened up the books and they showed me. But that was a very important turning point in the conversation, right? Because here I am saying to the supplier, your price is too low. You need to give me a higher price, right? And so that helps them to understand that I have their best interest and their long-term success. That was a particularly important milestone in the discussion, because from there, I was able to see that they were making enough money. We agreed on the price, and they won a very big contract over a 3-year period. They proved that they were a very reliable supplier because, cost is like the least important thing, because it's about business continuity. It's about quality and service. It's about the ease of the relationship. It's about the capability to innovate and the capability to offer technical solutions. And it's about the local to local relationship, right? So all of these things matter. And in a 3-year relationship, you get to demonstrate the reliability of supply, right? The stable pricing, the idea that you're going to have joint continuous improvement, because many times, my forecast is terrible, right? And I'm causing a lot of pain to the supplier. So, once you do this, you can have an open conversation where the supplier can say, you are not planning correctly. We need you to do this. We need you to do that. We need to improve the number of changes that you're making to the schedule, for example. But that's the kind of continuous improvement conversation you can have together over time. And the more you can build trust, the more you're going to now start to invest. Santiago, I want to build a new factory. We're going to launch new products in Vietnam. Are you interested in investing with us in Vietnam? I'm using this as an example. But then once you've got that trust over a 3-year, 5-year period, you will go forward and you will start investing with me. So there's an example of success in terms of mutual success. But this process I'm describing for you has saved, in terms of cost savings, millions and millions of dollars in US terms. So over the course of my career, in procurement, we've saved. I mean, this is working for big consumer products companies. We've probably saved 10% of the original cost. So we've delivered over $1 billion worth of savings. But it's not just cost savings. When you start to have these incredible relationships, it becomes about growing the top line. Okay. It becomes about innovation, right? So if you become the customer of choice and the supplier trusts you and trusts the relationship, they start to give you innovation ideas that grow the top line. It's not just about cost savings. It's about revenue growth through your supplier base. And now it's no longer about total cost, it's about total value. And that's the big difference. And I think that's what we're seeing now over the last 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. We're seeing the shift from total cost equation to total value generation.
Here, when we talk about this total value generation, something that has passed the last couple of years, not only in the States, probably around the world, is that most of the companies focus their ideas related with procurement just in price and in cost. They're just thinking about efficiency in the short term, and with the things that happened with COVID, we suffer huge impacts in all companies when they start to see that they cannot rely in their partners, they cannot get raw materials. For example, right now, the things that we have with the port of Shanghai that is closed, we cannot get materials from there. So we start to see that maybe the way that a supply chain was managed in the past in some companies, not in all, was not right. At the end, generate a lot of troubles. And I must say that since the end of last year and the beginning of this year, with the problems in China with ports, the problems between Russia and Ukraine, we start to feel a really, or we start to having a strong pressure over the supply chain. The supply chain start to become difficult. How you see the future of procurement, having everything, all these ideas in mind? How you see procurement in the future?
Well, so procurement is part of the overall supply chain, right? So they need to be total business system thinkers, right? And I wouldn't say that the supply chain model that we were using was not right. It was right for a time, and now the business environment has changed, so we have to adapt. For the last 20, 25 years, it's been about low-cost supply chains. That was the model. So we were offshoring, we were producing in China, we were producing in the Far East, in India. And now the business circumstances have changed. It's no longer about low cost. It's now about supply security. So, how do you ensure supply security? The model has changed. We have to get very creative, about changing very quickly to respond. So the way procurement is changing is that we now are less concerned about price. We're less concerned about cost. So therefore, we have to be concerned with continuity of supply, because at the end of the day, this is about protecting your revenue, right? And how do you protect your revenue? You've got to look at your, let's call it 80% of your revenue. What do you make? And you have to make sure you have a risk analysis in place, analyzing where the risk is. And if it's in the materials part of the supply chain, that's where procurement comes in. And you need to have mitigation plans in place, right? So it becomes a coordinating role. The procurement team becomes closely coordinated with the R&D teams, with the supply chain engineering teams, the manufacturing teams. And you need to have multiple options that are mitigating risk. So alternate materials, alternate specifications, alternate sources. It's all about nearshoring and onshoring now. So identifying different capacities. For a time, we were consolidating suppliers like crazy. We wanted to reduce the number of suppliers, consolidate everything with just few suppliers, because it would give us buying leverage. Now, since COVID, the opposite is true. You want to diversify your supply. Again, it's to guarantee supply security. So it's about finding capacity very, very quickly. Who has the capacity? How do you quickly qualify the supply base in order for them to become a qualified partner who can, sell to you? So, the role of procurement, they have to wear many hats. They have to be legal, they have to be finance, they have to be supply chain manufacturing, they have to be R&D, they have to be a coach, a mentor to the suppliers, and really they have to be sales and marketing internally. Because one of the challenges that we're facing, we're facing unprecedented inflation for the first time in over 40 years. This is new. We don't have a model for how to deal with this type of inflation. And the problem is that a lot of senior leaders don't accept reality, right? They're sitting there thinking, procurement will make the price increase go away. Go ahead, procurement, go, negotiate and make the increase go away. Well, that doesn't happen. That's not the entirety of the situation. You need to mitigate as much as you can. You need to reduce as much as you can. You need to look for opportunities to improve margin outside of raising prices or letting price increases go away. So it's forcing supply chains to look at their end-to-end waste and look at their end-to-end efficiencies. And this is where this digital transformation is coming in. You have to be able to synthesize big blocks of data very, very quickly for ease of decision making. And so this is creating a talent gap because you can't just put the digital transformation in unless you've got the processes and the talent to be able to do that, right? And so, having the right talent that can drive a lot of this digital transformation is the next challenge, the next big challenge that procurement is facing. So I'll leave it there to see if you have any more questions for me.
Yeah, actually, I have a final question. You told me about this talent gap. You told actually about that the people in the supply chain should have different hats, like legal hat and marketing hat and things like that. They should know from different things. And since you're one of the pioneers in the supply chain for women, that's something impressive, something important always to be the people that is leading the field. What do you think people should learn to become better professionals in the supply chain field? What they should read, what they should try to learn, since supply chain world is changing. Can you give us an advice of what the new generation should start learning right now?
Data science is critical, right? So if you've got data science and have the ability to analyze data very, very quickly, but certainly having a strong finance background, having a strong analytical background. So for the young generation, in terms of how do you get prepared, studying engineering, studying mathematics, studying analytical topics are perfect training ground for the field of supply chain. Doing internships while you're studying, to be able to study and practice by having internships and learn as much as you can. Take every opportunity to contribute and learn. And that's, for very young people. If you're already in your career, becoming certified either through ASCM, the Association of Supply Chain Management, as CPIM or CSCP. So certified in production and inventory management is one certification. If you get SIPS certification or ISM certification, if you're specifically in procurement, those are significant bodies of training that will train you in the industry. It teaches you the idea of total quality and total, cost and value drivers. So I would suggest that if you're early to mid-career, getting certified is an important step, to help you. But shadowing and doing different rotations within the supply chain is extremely important, particularly if you're going to be in procurement. You really need to understand all of the inputs into what drives, the flow of inbound materials. So, remember, we have 4 lanes in the supply chain highway. So it's plan, source, make, and deliver. To understand the ins and outs of a manufacturing facility, what drives efficiencies or lack of efficiencies. When you're in procurement, many issues in the manufacturing space happen because we have issues with quality from suppliers. You need to be able to understand those things in order to communicate to the supplier. How we plan, how we take a strategic plan, turn it into an annual plan, turn it into a production plan, and then, turn it into a supply plan is an extremely important process. So I would suggest that doing different rotations and getting different experience. So being in planning, go spend 2 years working in a factory, go work in logistics and understand, the ins and outs of transportation and warehousing and all of the impacts, in terms of how to be a partner of choice from a warehousing and distribution standpoint. What does the carrier have to deal with if they show up at your shipping location and you keep the driver waiting for 2 hours because you can't load them, right? These are all important considerations, and so my view is learn as much as you can, do various rotations to understand the end-to-end supply chain, get certified, right? And, it's a lifelong learning journey, right? You constantly have to be training and going through and following the big thought leaders and the influencers. I'll stop right there to see if you have anything else.
Okay, no, I must say that it was really, I must say, a pleasure, a great experience to